come with me.
What?
To meet the wizard.
Why couldn't tell me? This is your moment. I'm coming.
I've always loved going to cinema because I fall into the place. You need the best team you can get to do a Wicked.
Absolutely remarkable.
It was just my favourite film I've ever worked on.
If there are no further questions, I'm gonna go.
Hi, I'm Paula Benson, founder and editor of Film and Furniture. Today on the Film and Furniture podcast, we explore the movie Wicked, which transports audiences to worlds beyond imagination, unveiling the origin story of Elphaba and Glinda. Directed by John M. Chu and designed by production designer Nathan Crowley, this cinematic reimagining elevates world building to unprecedented heights. Join us as we explore this big world immersive experience where every architectural and decorative detail has been meticulously crafted. It really is amazing to meet you, Nathan. I've been wanting to speak to you for a very long time. You've received Oscars for Dark Knight and Interstellar and BAFTAs for Dunkirk. So what was your route to becoming a world-renowned production designer?
That sounds very grand. What happened? Well, I did 1 year at Sir John Catt's in London, a foundation year. Then I went down to Brighton to do interior architecture, but in those days it was called three-dimensional design. It was with the architecture school, and then I sort of got out of there, and I drafted for architects for a while. I very much realized I didn't want to be in that business. So I was a bit lost, really. And then I had some friends in Los Angeles who'd moved over there. And so I went over there and oddly bumped into a guy called Joe Hodges in a bar opposite Paramount, who was 2 years above me at art school. And he was saying that night in the bar, he goes, wow, they're looking for draftsmen or draftspeople. They really need a lot of, there's no one available on the union list because it's so busy here. And you should come in for an interview. And then I interviewed with Norman Garwood, who was the designer. Joe was working as, they call them set designers, the draftspeople. And so Norman Garwood, who did Brazil, designed films like Brazil, he hired me, and I just got lucky. So a series of lucky events.
And what an imagination you have, Nathan. With something like Wicked, that transports us to worlds way beyond most people's imaginations. So obviously we have the book, the original Wizard of Oz, and we have the stage adaptation. When these images from these other references are so strong in our minds, so creating something that is familiar and yet new, how did you do it?
How did it all happen? I'm not particularly a crazy theatre fan. I'm cinema through and through. I've always loved going to cinema because I fall into the place and it takes me away, and I don't know that I exist if it's a good film. And theatre can't get me there. So I've always been crazy into cinema. So it was interesting looking at the stage show. Mark Platt and John Chu phoned me and interviewed me. And, these are theatre people. And I'm a cinema person. And I said, I just want to be honest. I'm not a great fan of theatre, but if you're making a film, I can help you. The film was always a thing for me, and the imagination of that original 38 film, and then being in those Hollywood studios, there's a sort of romance of the fact they shot it on stage with backings. It's like, because that's my whole education on Bram Stoker's Dracula, I know how to do something. But the realization that I needed to recreate Oz was the sort of, that's a challenge. And I think as you get older in your design career as a filmmaker, you need to keep your enthusiasm and keep the challenges coming. My wife works alongside me and is key to the design process. So it was like, we have to recreate Oz, and we have to find a new path. And luckily, they wanted to try and do it with a great mixture of practical set building with CGI, because it's, the problem with fantasy is people don't understand that you can do it with practical sets. I mean, of course you need CGI as well, but they don't know that you can create a balance to immerse the audience, which is ultimately all I've ever wanted in cinema. I've been doing practical films all my career, and so I think it took every one of the Nolan films I've ever done to do Wizard of Oz. So it's like, can I mix this together? Can I cross the backing and find the Emerald City that you can love and enjoy that doesn't feel fake, you know? But of course, the theory of the Emerald City is that it's an illusion because the wizard is an illusionist. So there's a very sort of dynamic design problem in there. The new thing really that only belongs to the book and the play is Shiz. So I knew that we could own that. But at the same time, you've got Hogwarts out there, you've got Oxford, Cambridge, you've got Yale, Harvard, you've got these ancient establishments, which it couldn't be because everyone in Oz wants to go there. They can't be fearful of it. They've got to be so excited to get there on the first day. So we have to make it happy and whimsical, and it belongs in Oz. So there's all these massive amount of design challenges because you have to find your themes and you have to decide, like, what is your architecture? What is your landscape? What is your building materials? How do you get there? Even transport, like, how do you know, how are we getting to Shiz? Because there's an arrival on the first day and you can't go by horse and cart because the animals are free. So you're stepping on story. You can't go by balloon because the wizard owns the balloon. So you can't go by, we don't want cars. That would be silly. It became pretty obvious. We have to go there by boat, because historically, how would you get there? You go by boat, but we're in Oz. So what's an Aussian boat look like? And what's the landscape? So I think the design problem is to get you immersed in that world and get you into landscapes. So we shot in the Seven Sisters down in Sussex, which is that beautiful, winding, landlocked, snaking, beautiful river. So we designed some Oz boats, had them built in Prague, put them in the water there, sailed them down. And then the white rocks around that area and the cliffs informed the textural, the lightness and the whiteness of it, which then also informed the impassable desert. So that when we sing The Wizard and I, and you get to the cliff edge, you're looking over the impassable desert because Oz is a beautiful island surrounded by a white sea of sand, but in some lights, the sand looks like water, and so you need the white sand, which informs Shiz. And so you have to create those theories and bring them all together as a whole, as an overriding story of these two great friends that influence each other. It was just my favorite film I've ever worked on.
Amazing. And there's a lot of love coming through. But I mean, it's such a big, immersive world. But then there is also so much incredible detail in every single scene. So you had to think macro and micro. And I was actually really stunned at how much detail there is in every door handle, every ceiling, every tile. You know, every tile has another surface or a different texture or a different pattern to it. So a huge task. And I guess, Wicked is about harnessing your power. And I was thinking, how did you harness your power when designing Wicked? I mean, were you daunted or did you just take it in your stride?
No, I'm super naive because I started on films like Hook and Dracula. They used to terrify me as a 20-year-old, and then you realize that a lot of films aren't like this. But this is the kind of films I started on, and then I think going through nearly 20 years with Chris Nolan on all these practical filmmaking, where we go to places and make things, and we're in the landscape. I think everything sort of led up to doing this, what I call the MGM film, of Wicked. One of the big things for me in design is nostalgia. Like can I get you to be nostalgia, with texture? And the reason every surface is covered is because I feel like, because we're building a lot of backlots, and I know through experience, if you just have blank walls in backlots, it's incredibly dull because you've got people up against nothing. So you have to cover the thing. The Wizard of Oz is an American fairy tale. So the wizard is American. So when I think about how to do the Emerald City, I think of the White City in Chicago, the 1893 Walls Exposition there. It was a fantasy. It was a place that everyone wanted to visit. And so to me, they are parallel with the Emerald City. So that happening became like, okay, we can design tiles, and then different set of tiles that we can multiply and reuse. So although there's all this detail, in the wide, they become a uniform texture. So they work in the wide as well as a close-up.
Here we are, first day, Munchkinland.
Let's go back to Munchkinland, because I think that's what this last one is, right? Let's start in Munchkinland. I mean, first of all, you built a real yellow brick road with real yellow bricks, which is just amazing. And that had to be real yellow bricks, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, they're obviously painted, but they're plaster sheets. But yeah, we had to build the yellow brick road. The Munchkin village is like, that's a very hard thing to do, because there's been such good work in sort of Middle Earth and The Hobbit and Swiss French villages. Like, there's so many pitfalls that you have to reach beyond that. But Munchkinland, I think the way we found our way into it was like, what do they do? What do the Munchkins do? Because I can't build a village in a backlot without purpose, without story. John would say, I want it to be the most colorful, happy place. So that ultimately, this dark shadow comes over the landscape, which is the wizard. And so it was like, okay, they're farmers. What do they farm? And it's like, well, they farm color. Then what are our themes? It's like the rainbow. All the colors of the rainbow. So then it was like, okay, we need tulips. So then, if we're practical filmmakers, then we have to grow tulips. And so that was hurdle number one. It's the first set I started on, was trying to convince Universal to plant. I didn't tell them it was 9 million, because I didn't really know it was that many. I thought it was 1 million tulips. It seemed like a lot to me. When I met the farmer, Mark Eves, he needed the money to get the bulbs from the Netherlands and get them in the ground before the ground froze. So we learned a lot about growing tulips. But that was the core of the Munchkin design, is color. And so from that idea of growing tulips, it's like, let's grow tulips, and they're all the colors of the rainbow. Each house has a defined dye system, and they use the color to make cloth, and the house is then stained that color because of the dyes. And so then it becomes colorful. Then you can put thatch. We put the thatch roofs on. It was like, my word, that looks dull. So Mark Eves said, oh no, we're going to chop all the heads off the flowers after you filmed. And it was like, that's why tulip festivals exist, because they take all the flower colors and we put them all over the roofs. And it's like, so one thing evolved from the next. And I think that's how production design often is you sort of find your way instinctively through an idea. I mean, this is very important about practical filmmaking. If you go from just an illustration concept straight to CGI and you don't build it, you miss this part in the middle, which is called art direction. And so if you have a 15-week build on Munchkinland, you develop the idea as you go through with your art directors and with your construction team and with your set deck. You change it like a piece of sculpture, so you can get a much different result from an idea to a finished set. And if you get rid of the great period of art direction, where you try things, you adjust buildings, you try cutouts to make sure the perspectives work, and without that, you lose the reality of it in more than just a non-practical way.
Yeah, and I guess you get better performances when people are reacting to real objects and real smells, textures, real sensory experience. Must give a stronger performance, I'm sure, rather than working against a green screen or whatever.
Generally, everyone's fed up with green screens, and especially actors. I think they're fed up with working in front of green screens. We just have to balance it out, because visual effects are incredibly brilliant and useful, but you need to disguise it for the audience so it doesn't take you out of the film. You need to blend it like every great tool. So I think it's the balance is what we have to re-achieve.
And presumably you learn a lot about tulip growing as well.
Yeah, well, on Interstellar, I grew 500 acres of corn in Canada. So I wasn't afraid to plant tulips. I think the studio and the producers were far more afraid than I was, and were a little bit like, what are you doing? So it's like, I promise you, this will be a magical thing, and we will enjoy it. And like you said, when the actors arrive on a fully realized set, they get put in that moment. And then if the whole crew backs out and it's just John with his actors and the camera, I think it's just becomes a little bit magical.
Creating a world as iconic as Oz is no small feat. Nathan Crowley's challenge was to honour the legacy of the 1939 The Wizard of Oz Gregory Maguire's Wicked novel of 1995 and the 2003 musical stage adaptation. The 1995 Wicked novel is available to buy from our marketplace over at filmandfurniture.com, together with many books on film design or original novels that inspired movies.
Welcome, new students, to Shiz University, Miss Elphaba. You can room with Miss Galinda.
So moving on to Shiz University, so this is where magic is learned and where Elphaba and Galinda meet. So we start off by seeing, you mentioned the boat coming in there on the water, and then we see this courtyard with grand arches and these onion domes and the waterway. And, you know, what were the architectural influences for the university sort of courtyard and the exterior of the building there?
Well, that's interesting you say that, because it goes back to that sort of nostalgia thing. It was like, what do you connect with? You connect with courtyards in Rome or Venice, French, the color of French stone in the chateaus, or arches, Prague, so what makes you sort of feel like, oh, that's beautiful, and how can we get there into Shiz? And the water, of course. I mean, because we decided we were arriving by boat, we got to have a waterway courtyard, which of course is going to look beautiful in the night. But yeah, so we had the water, we had the architecture from all over Europe. And like, if we could like take Italian architecture, instead of building out of stone, we built it out of wood, onion domes, instead of wood shingles, we built them out of copper. And so we changed all the materiality of it. And then you sort of feel like you know it and you respond to it, but it is all sort of as a big old jumble. So I knew if we could sort of touch on the beauty of onion domes, if we could mix architecture together, the history of architecture. We had Portuguese tiles. We hand painted those so we could put our own stories of Shiz. I believe that Shiz should represent everything that was once great about Oz. So in that, we ended up sculpting tons of images of animals and painted them and with people. So you get this sort of history, and you'll see it when you walk into that courtyard. We'll see the sculpting of forests with different animals in the columns. And, so you put all this sort of information in that's story-driven about the place. And then, of course, I have to introduce Americana, which is the big arch. It's based on the giant Chicago arches, because it was like, I need Americana here. And, of course, the big thing about America is the landscapes. So, yeah, it took a bit of work.
Yeah, so, so you've got all these arches in the corridors of Shiz University, and also in the most amazing dorm room, which, let's face it, is going to be most kids' dream. And that room is just so incredible. So we have the domed ceiling, which looks like it's painted with botanical ivy growing.
Yeah, it's like a Dagorne wallpaper, so you have to sort of got to have the beauty of Dagorne with our story of nature, because Oz is nature.
And then all these incredible, like the suitcases, the luggage that has a sort of magical quality about it. Beautiful bedspreads and incredible sort of pink lights everywhere. Oh, and the Moorish ceiling light that Galinda swings round on.
And the windows come from the Brighton Pavilion, where, because it was like, I've looked at that pavilion since I was 18, and I've always been fascinated by the fact that there's this crazy building. It's one of the few Ozian buildings in England. And I wanted to film in it, but, it's a museum and you can't swing on lights and you can't put flying monkeys in it. So and they took us up into the domes in the roofs, and it was like, oh my God, these are the most beautiful windows I've ever seen. So it's like, we spent so much time in that dorm that we kind of had to expand it with these two sort of oval bed areas in an oval with a dome. So it was a dome within a dome within a dome. And then that way, John had continuous interest. So try not to put any two corners anywhere. So you could move around that room because he had two song numbers in there, popular being the John one. And there were all these, Lee Sandel's the decorator, made all these wondrous traveling cases with the popped open and special effects, did all these mechanics. It was all done for real. And so under this, we lifted the set up to about 8 foot, and was it 6? And all the mechanics are underneath the room. So they have all these hydraulics and air compressed. So they're all triggering to get everything to pop up and the clothes rail to spin out and, to go with the dance number. It took a lot. The choreographer, John, Alice, the DP, we built them a sort of plywood mock-up of it so they could just rehearse. The room couldn't be too big, but they had 2 song numbers in it. So it had to feel cinematically like it was a dorm room, but then we had to stage all this stuff. So, much more complicated than you'd imagine, but that's the idea. It's supposed to be sort of simplistically, the audience is supposed to just fall into it without understanding just how complicated that set is. I put a corridor on it because it just doesn't seem right not to have an Aussian corridor, a Shiz corridor. And John was like, I don't need this corridor. I said, well, I don't know. It's wrong not to have a corridor on this room. I said, it just seems too small. And then, of course, the end of Popular comes out into the corridor. The thing about John, he will shoot every corner of the set.
No stone unturned. So talking about mechanicals, the library, is this John's idea, director, or is this your idea to have the moving library? I mean, talk about dance numbers. So we're going to have a dance scene and we're going to make the floors move 360 degrees.
Yes. So I'm massive. My special effects coordinator, Paul Corbel, has worked with me on many films, including Dunkirk, and he goes back to the Batmans. So I love moving. I've always loved moving sets, and it comes really from a child watching James Bond. So I know the excitement of to me, and I'm sure it's to lots of people, if the set starts moving, it's like everyone's like, wow, and obviously there's a royal wedding with Fred Astaire, which is just an incredible piece. And what that leads you to is like, dance can actually bridge what a normal scene can't do. The first thing I did was so I said, John, what if we had 6 spinning wheels? Like, we need a spinning wheel set, and everything has to go backwards. And I said, I don't know what the spinning wheels are in. I don't know what they're for or what they're housing. So John was saying, I love that. Let's make them bookcases. So we built the whole set around the idea of these spinning shelves. And Paul Corbel started testing how to make rotating shelves that dancers could work on. And really, the idea came from, we're introducing Fierro. He's like the coolest guy ever, and he's coming to Shiz. So he better have a cool thing to introduce him and to dance to. And he's dancing through life. He needs to be whimsical, and the fact he turns the machine on and then starts this dance. This is what I love about this group of filmmakers. It was like, you put an idea in front of John and Mark Plan. It's like, yeah, let's give it a go. This incredible, brilliant optimism and positivity, not negativity. And
sounds like every idea you came up with was a yes. It was anything that you wanted to do that you weren't allowed to do?
The train was, the Universal said, I said, I don't have the money to build this train, but I think we should have a train. It took us a while to find the design. It's like Louis XIV automatons, mechanical elements, like what is a train if it's an automaton? Because the train is a single carriage, and at the back you've got the conductor, like you would on a Louis XIV carriage with the guys at the back, the footmen. So you kind of introduce sort of ideas you're familiar with. But yeah, we eventually got the funds to build the train. It's a running train, so they have a big engine in it, and so we put the track across the field, and of course we grew the barley around the track. Because why wouldn't you? So, and our station, again, that's an American image. That's a Western image. You've got the long platform, it's open, and you've got the wheat fields or the barley fields, and then the train runs through it.
This incredible train, I can't believe it's built and you built the track and everything. So it leads us to the majestic Emerald City, and here's a whole other vibe going on, but still immersive, huge, wonderful space. And again, a real sort of mix of architectural influences and textures and tiles. And
the hardest thing with the Emerald City is the exterior, because you're like, what is it? It's like, is it made of glass? Is it made of emeralds? Does it have transparency? Does it have solidity? It's full of green, which green is, it's not, you need other colors with green to see the green. Otherwise, it's just nothing. It really stems from, like I said, from the White City, and then looking at, how those modernists made their tiles. That was sort of, they were carved, like the great Carlos Scarpa used to do his tiles, and the Mayans, and obviously Frank Lloyd Wright came a bit later than 93, but Sullivan was in there with his sculpted tiles as well. Actually, my favorite elements are the eyebrowed windows that have the sort of snake skin tile on the inside. The problem I had with the green, apart from needing lots of tones of green, I couldn't see it unless I put like navy blues in there or bronzes. It was like, okay, I need to now, with my painters during the art direction period, is find how we mix the tones and how we break them up. And to get the sort of contrast you need to see the shape. And so, yeah, it was a sort of developed. It started with the train arch when you drive. And the train came in at 8 foot high. And I really like the idea it sticks into the street. So there's no station. You just get off the train and you're in the street. And we're into One Short Day. And then we're through an arch. And suddenly it's night and we're into Wizardmania. And the thing is moving. And there's dancers and there's shops. And that was a lot of John. Like that dance sequence all the way to The Wizard Will See You Now. It knocked my socks off when he did it. It was like, that's incredible. John is so imaginative. He said, I think I need a fountain for this Wizardmania number. And it's like, sure. He says, yeah, but it's got to be the most sort of crazy fountain that opens in some way. So he sort of came up with this spinning fountain, the flowers open and things come out of it and the water starts. And again, when you have the confidence of having the art teams, the art directors, the set decorators, the construction, who are the backbone of all film, and then you have special effects, you can kind of make anything if you have the right team. And you need the best team you can get to do a Wicked.
Yeah, I should say, I can't think of anything that's so macro and micro at the same time on every single level. You know, from the Grimmery, then there is sort of miniature map, the mini model world.
Yeah. Oh, yes, that was, again, I've done a lot of miniatures. Again, it stems back to Dracula, but I've done tons of miniatures in my life because that's how we did things. Even on Dunkirk, the Heinkels were flying miniatures, but the map was very difficult. So, because it was forced, it was this egg shape. So you have to force the perspective of the land and the sky down to the egg, which is this sort of horizon point. And we have a great scenics. I mean, a lot of this crew have been working with me for 20 years. So the scenics would then paint out of it. So clouds would go to big to nothing. And then the model makers, they couldn't just make it go from big to nothing because the Emerald City had to be the biggest thing. So they were going from sort of medium to big out to little. And then, of course, to complicate things, because John always likes to say, wouldn't it be wonderful if the lid could lift off and it could be a night sky and the moon could come up? And it was like, and you know, you take that the number and then Jeff Goldblum is dancing in the mat. So that was a wondrous thing to make because we've never done anything like that. It was like, okay, how do we do this? And you just have the right people. It's all about the right people.
And there must be a giant pyramid of people for this incredible film. I would love to talk to you forever and ever and ever, to be honest with you, but I am going to have to wrap it up. But there's a last 2 or 3 questions I want to ask you, if that's okay. Does green go with pink?
Yeah, apparently so. Which green and which pink are you talking about?
Oh, yeah, I'm sure that a million greens and a million pinks to get that right. But if you had to take something home from the set to have in your own home, an object, a piece of furniture, a tile, what would it be?
It'd be the train.
Also, it would be the train.
The train got taken apart. So I do actually have the nose of the train with the old symbol downstairs, but it's quite big.
Amazing. Oh, wow. You really did take it home from the set.
Only a little bit, just the one panel. They gave it to me. Construction boxed it up and said, this belongs to you.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Nathan. An absolute honour to talk with you. We're going to see a lot more of you, I think.
I hope so. We'll have to wait and see.
I hope you enjoyed that insightful chat. You can take a look at our in-depth feature as well, with lots of film set images at filmandfurniture.com, where you'll find many fascinating articles on interiors, furniture, decor and lighting in film, as well as where to find these items for your own home. That's all in our marketplace. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and see you next time.